Tonight, we're not stepping into the mind of a philosopher or the gilded hall of a king. We're stepping onto a battlefield, but not the kind you've seen in movies, with its choreographed duels, heroic slow-motion charges, or armor that stays conveniently clean. No, tonight, we dive into the real thing. The mud, the confusion, the panic, the sweat, and the steel. This is what actually happened in a medieval battle. And spoiler alert, it looked nothing like the legends. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Echoes in Time. Before we get comfortable, or as comfortable as one can be, before a story like this, take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what we do here. And I'd love to know, when you think of a medieval battle, what's the first image that comes to mind? A noble knight on a white horse? A heroic sword duel? Let me know in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's rather grim journey together. You awaken to the sound of something between a distant horn and a man screaming the word, "March," like it owes him money. There is no snooze button. There is no mattress. There is only the damp, cold earth and the deep, spiritual ache of having slept in your armor. You try to stretch but immediately regret it. Your chainmail has become one with your body, a clingy, metallic ex-lover that pinches in all the wrong places. Around you, in the gray pre-dawn light, a dozen other soldiers are stirring, each wearing the same mask of profound regret and early onset trench foot. One guy is still asleep, his head resting on a helmet now full of rainwater. Another is trying to pry a slug out of his boot with the tip of his dagger. You're not sure if you should attempt to find breakfast or just apologize to your internal organs in advance. Breakfast, by the way, is what we'd call a historically significant disappointment. It's a crust of bread so hard it could probably deflect an arrow, possibly baked last Lent. You chew slowly, not because you're savoring the flavor, but because your jaw is still sore from yesterday's feast, which consisted of meat of a questionable origin and something that may have once been a vegetable. You wash it down with a swig of warm, cloudy ale from a waterskin, because you know that drinking medieval water is a game of bacterial roulette. You are not prepared to win. There's no time for grooming. Not that it matters. You haven't seen your own reflection in weeks. And frankly, that's for the best. You splash a handful of what might be swamp water on your cheeks for the illusion of hygiene. Then begin the grim process of strapping on gear that smells like it's been fermenting in fear since the last crusade. Then come the orders, yelled by a man on a horse who clearly hasn't walked a mile in his own life, let alone in 50 pounds of rusty iron. The army stirs, men grumble, armor clanks, and someone is already limping from stepping on a particularly sharp rock. You haven't even seen the enemy yet, and you're already exhausted, damp, hungry, and vaguely regretting every life choice that led you to this moment. And the worst part, this is one of the good mornings. The command is given, march. And so you do, not because you're brave or filled with patriotic fervor, but because the alternative is being accused of desertion, which usually ends with an important part of your body being chopped off. So you trudge forward, one squelching, miserable footstep at a time. The ground beneath you is less earth and more moist. Primordial despair. Mud is a given in any medieval campaign, but this is no ordinary mud. This is a special, sentient kind of mud that sucks at your boots, like it's trying to steal your soul, or at the very least, your left shoe. You pause for a second to adjust a strap, and instantly fall a step behind, earning a murderous glare from the man behind you, whose face clearly says, "I will eat you if this slows us down again." Armor, it turns out, was not designed for long-distance hiking. It creaks, it groans, it pinches, and it rubs in places you didn't even know had skin. Your shoulders ache from the weight of the chainmail. Your thighs burn from the friction of the leg guards, and your inner thighs are forming a rebellious alliance against you with every clanking step. You are, essentially, a walking iron sausage being slow roasted in your own sweat. The air smells like a horrifying cocktail of livestock, cheap onions, and collective fear. Someone ahead of you passes gas with the kind of concussive force that suggests they lost a fierce battle with last night's turnip stew. You try breathing through your mouth, but immediately regret that decision as well. Your senses are under constant assault. You pass a dead hedgehog, the splintered remains of a broken cart, and what you're pretty sure is a human toe. No one stops. Stopping is for people who enjoy being yelled at. The sergeant yells anyway. He never stops yelling. It seems to be his entire personality now. Morale is a foreign concept. Some men try to sing war songs to cope, their voices cracking with exhaustion. Others mutter prayers under their breath. One guy in the back just screams intermittently into the wind. No one stops him. Honestly, it kind of helps. At one point, a hopeful thought crosses your mind. Maybe the enemy will see us coming, realize we're too intimidating, and surrender before we get there. Then you remember they're probably marching through the same mud, smelling the same smells, and thinking the exact same thing about you, which means this is definitely going to end with someone panicking, everyone stabbing each other, and you desperately trying to remember which end of the spear is the pointy one. After what feels like several lifetimes, a hill appears on the horizon. Of course it does. Every medieval battle in history seems to take place at the top of a stupid hill. As you begin the grueling ascent, someone ahead slips on a loose rock and rolls down past you. No one helps him up. He's probably better off now anyway. And still, you march. Eventually, you arrive at the place where you'll fail to sleep tonight. The battle camp. It's less a base of operations and more an organized outbreak of misery. There are tents, sure, if you're a knight or some other form of nobility. The rest of you get a patch of mud that is only slightly less cursed than the surrounding mud. You stake your claim by collapsing onto the ground and calling it a bed. Your neighbor does the same. Congratulations. You've started a trench community. The smell hits you first, a horrifying blend of wet wool, unwashed bodies, fermented boots, and whatever is currently rotting near the food cart. There's a constant buzz in the air. Not excitement, just flies. Thousands of them. You've made your peace with the flies. Some of them have names now. Then there's the latrine, and by latrine, we mean a shallow, hastily dug trench that radiates an aura of profound regret. Privacy, none. Smell, biblical. You learn to not make eye contact with anyone during your visit. Everyone's dignity has already fled the camp. You're handed a bowl of stew. It's gray. That's the only discernible flavor. Gray. You ask the cook what's in it, and he just makes eye contact with you for 5 deeply uncomfortable seconds before walking away. You eat it anyway, because you're starving, and you just have to hope that whatever meat is in there didn't have a name 2 hours ago. Some men are sharpening their weapons on whetstones. Others are gambling with dice. A few are praying very loudly, not out of pure devotion, but to make sure everyone sees that they're praying, just in case God is offering extra protection to the dramatic ones today. You hear hacking coughs, distant weeping, a man singing off-key about bread, and somewhere, someone trying to play a lute like it's a weapon. A knight barks an order nearby. He's clean. He smells like lavender. You hate him instantly. You curl up in your damp cloak, lying next to a man who snores like he swallowed a donkey. You try to sleep, but your brain is too busy imagining all the ways you could die tomorrow or tonight if that goat tied up nearby kicks you in the ribs again. And as you finally start to doze off, a voice yells from the distance, "Form up at sunrise." Fantastic. Another beautiful morning awaits. If you're enjoying this realistic look into the past, please consider hitting the like button. It lets me know you appreciate this kind of content and helps more people find our channel. Dawn breaks, and with it comes the icy, gut-wrenching realization that you are probably going to die in a field today, possibly before lunch. Trumpets sound, a mournful, jarring noise that cuts through the morning mist. Men groan. You crawl out of your damp cocoon of lice-infested wool to find your comrades already standing, pretending to be motivated. You fall into line because standing in neat rows makes people feel slightly more in control of their impending doom. It's a lie, of course, but it's a lie you can shuffle into with numb feet and questionable bowel control. And then he appears, the noble commander. He's wearing polished plate armor so clean it's practically glowing. He has that crisp, well-rested energy that only people who have never been punched in the face tend to have. He surveys his troops like a disappointed parent who just found out you've joined the losing side in a tavern brawl. He clears his throat. Everyone braces. The pep talk begins. Men, today we fight for glory. He pauses for dramatic effect. Someone near you coughs up something that sounds alive. For our king, our lands, our honor. The crowd murmurs something in response, but it's mostly from stomach cramps, not patriotism. Look to your brothers. Look to your steel. You glance sideways. The man next to you is visibly shaking and has put his helmet on backward. His steel is a slightly bent spear. The enemy fears us. They probably don't. They probably have their own well-rested commander yelling the exact same thing in a different accent. If you die today, oh, good. The cheerful part, you die as heroes. You suppress the urge to raise your hand and ask if it's possible to die later, perhaps as a successful and well-fed baker. Then comes the part about God. God is on our side, which is reassuring, except you're fairly sure God has been busy smiting everyone with equal enthusiasm this season. The speech ends with a dramatic sword thrust to the sky and a mighty shout of, "Forward!" No one moves. A few guys blink. One man sneezes. The shouting continues until, finally, someone shuffles forward, and the rest reluctantly follow. Not out of conviction, mostly because standing still means the commander might single you out for a volunteer job. And you've heard what happened to the last volunteer. You are now spiritually prepared to panic with a purpose. There is no elegant, cinematic charge. What happens next is a slow, terrifying, and profoundly awkward shuffle towards the other side of the field. And then, just as the formation starts looking somewhat believable, meaning no one is actively walking in the wrong direction, the sky betrays you. It begins with a sound, a soft, distant whoosh. That quickly becomes a collective whisper of doom. Then the shouting starts. Shields up. You scramble to obey, hoisting your wooden shield, which suddenly feels far too small and alarmingly homemade. A moment later, the sky darkens, not with clouds, but with hundreds of tiny death sticks launched from the enemy's side with alarming enthusiasm. And then they fall. The arrows rain down with all the mercy of an angry god having a very bad day. The man 2 rows ahead of you drops without a sound, an arrow sticking out of his shoulder like a forgotten quill. Someone screams. Someone else curses. Here's what the movies don't show you. Arrows don't just thud cleanly into chests. They clatter off armor, stick in thighs, pierce feet, and embed themselves in all manner of things not meant to be pierced. You shrink behind your shield as an arrow clangs off it. You immediately decide this shield is your new best friend. You mentally name it Gerald. You whisper promises to Gerald that if you survive this, you'll never talk badly about its lopsided shape again. Then the second volley comes. By this point, any illusion of calm has evaporated. One guy just lies down and pretends to be dead. Not a terrible strategy. Honestly, eventually, the sky clears. You're alive. Gerald did good. But now the real horror begins. Close combat, which means it's time to get very sweaty, very loud, and probably stabbed. One moment you're trembling in your half-formed line, and the next, all hell breaks loose. Your side surges forward, not with courage, but with the reluctant momentum of men who know they'll be trampled if they hesitate. Then you collide. You slam into another human being like a sack of potatoes, hitting another sack of potatoes that happens to be wearing sharp objects. Forget fancy swordplay. This is not a dance. This is a meat grinder. You swing your weapon, a short sword, an axe, maybe just a glorified kitchen tool. You don't aim. You flail. The air fills with the sounds of chaos, the shriek of metal on metal, the wet thud of a mace connecting with a helmet, the crack of a wooden shield splintering. You are now deeply, intimately aware of the smell of your enemy. Sweat, fear, and onions. There is no personal space. There is only panic. You try to remember your training, but it mostly consisted of swing hard and don't die. So you keep swinging. Every now and then, someone falls. Sometimes they scream. Sometimes they just go quiet instantly. You try not to look. This is a bar fight in the world's worst tavern, with 500 angry men and no one to break it up. And it's just getting started. If you thought medieval battle would sound like the elegant clash of swords and heroic trumpets, you are breathtakingly mistaken. It sounds more like a livestock market colliding with a blacksmith shop during an earthquake. The first thing you notice is the screaming. It's constant, not just from the wounded, but from the living. Men yell to psych themselves up. They yell because they've been stabbed. They yell because someone stepped on their foot. You've got the shrill screams of young lads who should have stayed in the bakery, guttural bellows from big men with axes, and the high-pitched, borderline apologetic whimper of a guy realizing he's wearing the wrong team's colors. Then come the weapons themselves. Swords clang against shields. Maces make a dull, horrifying thump when they connect with something soft, usually a face. Arrows whistle past your ears with the precise sound of regret. But the worst sound, it's not the screaming, it's not even the dying, it's the wet sounds. The squelch of someone stepping in something that used to be a person. The slurp of blood and mud mixing beneath your boots. The squish when someone lands badly and doesn't get up. These aren't sounds you forget. They take up permanent residence in your nightmares. If you were hoping for a cinematic slow-motion end, where you deliver a final, poignant monologue before dramatically collapsing, I regret to inform you, that's not how this goes. Most people in a medieval battle died unseen, unheard, and often from behind, usually by a guy who didn't even know their name. Sometimes, it was even someone on their own side. 1 minute you're swinging your axe, the next, thunk. Something pierces your back, and your knees betray you. You fall forward into the mud with the grace of a collapsing haystack. No one notices. There are no final words. Just you, the dirt, and the very strong suspicion that this all could have been avoided if you'd become a monk. The battle is over. You're not quite sure how it ended. There was no dramatic banner raised. One moment it was chaos. The next, there were fewer screams and more groaning. That's how you know it's done. You look around, blinking through blood and sweat. The field is littered with bodies, weapons, and discarded dreams. It's quiet now, unsettlingly so. Someone mumbles, "We won," with all the enthusiasm of a man who just found out he gets to live, but only in a tent full of dysentery. Victory in medieval warfare doesn't mean fanfare. It means not being dead yet. You drag your bruised, aching carcass back across the field, past fallen friends and former enemies, all of whom share the same surprised expression. Your commander, somehow still clean, makes another speech about bravery. You can't hear it. Your ears are still ringing, but you're alive. Filthy, traumatized, possibly concussed, but alive, which, by medieval standards, is a resounding success. But what surviving a medieval battle really earns you is a seat around the campfire, a lukewarm mug of something vaguely alcoholic, and the right to start rewriting history before your bruises even finish forming. This is how it always ends, not with a noble ceremony, but with a bunch of filthy, traumatized men sitting on damp logs, trying to one-up each other with stories that get more heroic by the minute. You listen as a man swears he took down 6 knights with nothing but a frying pan. Another claims he caught an arrow in midair and threw it back. You nod. You sip. You lie a little, too. In your version, you didn't trip over a corpse and scream. You strategically repositioned. The part where you tried to crawl into a shrub to avoid the cavalry, that becomes a stealth maneuver. Everyone here is doing the same thing, turning trauma into legend. It's not about ego, it's about survival. If you can laugh about it, maybe it didn't scar you permanently. If you tell the story well enough, maybe it will drown out the actual memories. The smell, the sounds, the look in a dying man's eyes. Laughter bubbles up, dry and slightly desperate. A man plays a lute that's missing 2 strings. The tune is off, but no one cares. For one night, there's warmth, there's bread, and there's the camaraderie of men who know exactly how much of your story is false. Because theirs is too, and for one night, at least, that's enough. What's a piece of history that you feel is often romanticized, hiding a much grittier reality? Let me know. Thank you for walking this muddy field with me. If you found this journey valuable, please subscribe and share. Until next time, stay curious, and maybe be thankful for boring days. Forget the idea of a single, continuous wall built at one time. Forget the romantic myth that you can see it from the moon. The story of the Great Wall of China is not the story of one wall, but of many. It's a narrative of fear, ambition, and an empire's desperate, 2,000-year-long attempt to draw a line between itself and chaos, a line written and rewritten in earth, stone, and bone. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Echoes in Time. Tonight, we trace the history of one of the most monumental and misunderstood structures ever conceived by humankind. Before we begin this epic journey, if you enjoy history that challenges myths and explores the grand scale of human endeavor, please consider hitting that subscribe button and ringing the bell. And I have a question for you. What does a wall mean to you? Is it for protection, for division, or something else entirely? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let's travel back to a time before China was a single nation, to a land of scattered kingdoms and constant war. Centuries before the Great Wall became a continuous monument, the landscape of what would become China was a chaotic checkerboard of kingdoms. This was the Warring States period, a time of relentless conflict when 7 powerful states clawed and bled for dominance over the Chinese heartland. These kingdoms, constantly at odds with one another, had little reason to cooperate. Instead, driven by fear and ambition, they raised their own individual walls, local, often makeshift defenses built from tamped earth, stones, and timber. These early fortifications were not part of some grand, unified plan. They were desperate measures, the ancient equivalent of drawing a line in the sand and daring a rival to cross it. They were statements of power. This is mine. Try and take it. But it wasn't just rival kingdoms they feared. To the north, beyond the cultivated fields and river valleys, roamed nomadic tribes, the Xiongnu chief among them. They were skilled horsemen who moved like ghosts across the steppes, raiding for grain and livestock, and then vanishing before any retaliation could be organized. These raids were not just inconvenient. They were existential threats, capable of severing trade routes and burning entire villages. The scattered states had little choice but to try and wall off the wild north. The earliest of these barriers stretched for miles, but they were fragile, hastily constructed with layers of rammed earth or brush and mud. The construction was brutal. Tens of thousands of peasants, conscripts, and prisoners were thrown into the grueling work, often with no choice and no rest. These isolated walls were poorly maintained and often crumbled in the face of harsh weather and time. Still, they represented the beginning of an idea that China's vast northern frontier could be tamed not through negotiation, but through sheer will and wall building. No single king at this time envisioned the Great Wall as we know it today, that dream of unification, of a singular barrier stretching across the spine of a nation, would have to wait for the rise of an emperor who craved not just power, but eternity carved in stone. In 221 BCE, after centuries of chaos, one man did what no one before him had managed. He united all of China under his rule. His name was Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of the Qin dynasty. He was a figure of immense, almost terrifying ambition. He didn't just want to rule a kingdom. He wanted to forge an empire and redefine the landscape itself. One of his first and most audacious decrees was to link and expand the existing regional walls built during the Warring States period. These individual barriers, some already decaying, would be joined into a single, massive defense network to keep the nomadic Xiongnu at bay. But this was no simple repair job. It was an engineering campaign on an imperial scale. Qin's vision was not just about military defense. It was about power, unity, and absolute control. A continuous wall symbolized not just the edge of civilization, but the edge of his personal authority, a clear line between his ordered world and the chaos beyond. To build it, he conscripted a workforce of staggering size, hundreds of thousands of soldiers, peasants, and, most grimly, political prisoners and scholars who had run afoul of his brutal regime. The conditions were merciless. Many were worked to death in remote mountain passes or scorching deserts, their bodies, according to legend, buried within the wall itself. The project soon earned a grim nickname among the people, the longest cemetery on Earth. The materials were brutal and basic. The primary method was rammed earth, where dirt and gravel were packed down layer by layer between wooden frames, pounded flat by the feet of workers or heavy logs. The tools were primitive. The terrain was unforgiving, but Qin Shi Huang was relentless. He didn't just build a wall, he built an empire. In his mind, the roads, the standardized weights and measures, the unified script, and the Great Wall were all part of the same grand project, to create unassailable order from chaos and leave behind a legacy that would last 10,000 years. The original Qin Wall may not have looked like the majestic stone structure we picture today, but it was the foundation, the first draft of a legend, written in packed earth and human suffering. After the death of Qin Shi Huang and the swift collapse of his dynasty, many of his sweeping reforms were undone, but not the wall. The Han dynasty, which rose in the Qin's wake and ruled from 206 BCE to 220 CE, recognized the same eternal truths. China's northern border was never truly secure. So, rather than abandon the project, the Han emperors doubled down, expanding, strengthening, and redefining the Great Wall on a scale that dwarfed even the first emperor's efforts. Under the ambitious Emperor Wu of Han, the wall transformed from a static military barrier into the backbone of imperial strategy. The Han launched massive campaigns to push back the Xiongnu, extending the wall farther west than ever before, deep into the harsh deserts of the Hexi Corridor. This extension was crucial. It protected the burgeoning trade routes that would become the Silk Road, turning the wall from a line of defense into an artery of commerce. The Han didn't just rebuild the Qin walls, they adapted and improved them. While still using rammed earth in many areas, they incorporated bricks and stones where available. Most importantly, they added a sophisticated network of watchtowers at regular intervals. These towers allowed soldiers to spot raiding parties from afar and light signal fires, a column of smoke by day, a flame by night. This early warning system was astonishingly effective, allowing a message of an attack to travel hundreds of miles in just a few hours, far faster than any horse. The Han Wall became more than a line. It was a living logistical network. Garrison posts, signal towers, and supply depots turned the wall into a functional military road, allowing troops and provisions to move quickly across the vast and difficult terrain. The empire stationed thousands of soldiers and even sponsored settlers to live in remote forts, creating a unique frontier society where families, merchants, and military outposts clung to the wall for protection. Here, in the dusty crossroads of the empire's edge, Han, Chinese, and nomadic cultures met, mingled, traded, and occasionally clashed. By the end of the Han era, the wall had transformed from a simple barrier into a symbol of imperial presence, a testament to the dynasty's power to project order deep into the wilderness. If you're finding this epic story of human endeavor inspiring, please take a moment to hit the like button. It helps these incredible histories reach a wider audience. With the fall of the mighty Han dynasty in 220 CE, China once again unraveled into centuries of political disunity and civil war. As the emperors fell, so too did the priority of the Great Wall. What had been a powerful, centrally maintained system of defense was now left to decay. Many stretches of the Han and Qin walls crumbled into dust, reclaimed by the very nature they were meant to hold back. Watchtowers collapsed, garrison outposts were abandoned, and the wall became less a structure and more a buried memory, half swallowed by shifting desert sands and creeping forest vines. But the threats from the north never disappeared. New nomadic powers rose and fell across the steppes. The wall, in these chaotic times, was less a hard border and more a porous relic. Some regional warlords would use leftover segments for their own local fortifications, but more often, the old walls were mined for materials. Bricks and stones were scavenged to build homes, temples, and pig pens. It was a slow cannibalization of a fallen empire's bones. In the popular imagination, the wall faded into the realm of legends and old records. Poets wrote of the cold, bitter northern frontier, a place where soldiers went to die, their service long forgotten by the courts in the south. Still, even in its decay, the idea of the wall remained powerful. It lingered as a dream of unity and strength in the face of chaos. That dream would stir once more when a new dynasty, born from military conquest and fueled by a deep-seated trauma, rose from the ashes. When the Ming dynasty came to power in 1368, it did so by overthrowing the Yuan dynasty, a foreign power ruled by the Mongols. The trauma of nearly a century of Mongol rule was still fresh, and the Ming emperors were driven by an urgent priority: never again. They saw the need for a fortified northern barrier not as symbolic, but as utterly practical and existential. And unlike the earthen ramparts of the past, the Ming Wall would be an engineering marvel of stone, brick, and firepower. This was the Great Wall of our imagination. Construction ramped up in the 1500s under brilliant generals who saw the wall as a comprehensive defense system. They built with quarried stone and millions of kiln-fired bricks. The ramparts were wide enough for several horsemen to ride abreast, reinforced with crenellations, and equipped with sophisticated drainage systems. Watchtowers, some rising as high as a 3-story building, were placed within sight of one another, forming an unbroken line of communication. This new wall snaked across jagged mountain ridges and clung to sheer cliffs, a stone dragon winding across the landscape. Life for the thousands of soldiers stationed along the Ming Wall was a harsh existence of grit, monotony, and survival. These weren't elite troops. They were mostly conscripted farmers and peasants, exiled to the frontier where the winters were brutal and boredom was a constant enemy. Their days were filled with endless patrols, drills, and repairs. Food was simple and often scarce. Yet, small communities formed, as families often accompanied the soldiers, creating a unique society that lived entirely in the wall's shadow. But walls, no matter how high, are only as strong as the people guarding them. By the 1600s, corruption had weakened the Ming dynasty from within. Troop salaries were stolen, supplies vanished, and morale on the wall plummeted. It was in this weakened state that the Ming faced their greatest threat: the Manchus, a rising power from the northeast. The Manchus didn't need to storm the wall with ladders and siege engines. All they needed was an open gate. That gate came in 1644 at the strategic Shanhai Pass. A Ming general named Wu Sangui, caught between a peasant rebellion that had already seized the capital of Beijing and the powerful Manchu army outside the wall, made a fateful decision. He opened the gates, hoping the Manchus would help him defeat the rebels. Instead, they seized the capital for themselves and founded a new dynasty, the Qing. In a single moment of political miscalculation and betrayal, the Great Wall's entire purpose collapsed. It had not been conquered. It had been made irrelevant. Under the new Qing dynasty, which expanded China's borders far beyond the wall, the once mighty fortification began its final, quiet fade into history. No longer a military necessity, it was abandoned, maintenance ceased, garrisons emptied, and nature began its slow reclamation. For centuries, the wall was a ruin, a monument to a bygone age. It wasn't until the 9th and 20th centuries, as Western explorers arrived with wide eyes and notebooks, that the wall began its reemergence, this time not as a fortress, but as a myth, They romanticized it, exaggerated its scale, and cemented its status as one of the wonders of the world. When the People's Republic of China was established, the wall was reborn once more, this time as a powerful symbol of Chinese identity, endurance, and national pride. Mao Zedong famously declared, "He who has not climbed the Great Wall is not a true man," turning it from a ruin into a patriotic rite of passage. Today, tourists flock to restored sections, hiking along battlements where soldiers once stood watch. They are drawn not just to the view, but to the sheer audacity of the myths. The idea that human hands could shape something so vast, so defiant, it could outlast dynasties. And yet, large portions of the wall remain wild and broken, with over 30% having already disappeared, a race against time and neglect. In the end, the Great Wall was never truly about keeping enemies out. Its military record is one of failure as much as success. Its true purpose was to draw a line between civilization and wilderness, between empire and uncertainty, between the known world and the great, frightening unknown. In doing so, it became something far greater than a defense. It became a legend, stone by stone, story by story. The Great Wall still stands, not just in the hills of northern China, but in the imagination of the world. What do you think is the true purpose of great monuments from the past? Are they for defense, for pride, or to leave a story for the future? Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey. If you found it meaningful, please subscribe and share. Until next time, stay curious.